If you watched this programme last night, we showed you just how bad some of the capital's rented housing is right now. Tonight, we look at what can happen if you complain to your local borough council about where you live and how some landlords are evicting people instead of fixing their problems. Katie Barnfield has been investigating.
So you can see this video here, which is obviously just the water dripping through. This is our bedroom ceilings.
The crack was widening and it was getting to the point where it was damp whenever it rained and rain was coming through our ceiling.
When Simon and Alicia told their landlord about their leaking roof, they thought it would be fixed. Instead, he gave them an eviction notice.
A little bit after we complained and said that we were going to go to the council about it, we then received a Section 21 through the post, but we definitely think it was as a revenge for basically knowing our rights with regards to the leaking roof.
If you complain to the council because your landlord isn't doing repairs, they have the power to issue one of these. It's an improvement notice which forces your landlord to fix the problems and protects you from eviction for 6 months. But a lot of councils in London are preferring to take an informal approach which doesn't protect tenants at all.
The approach varies wildly between different councils. For instance, over the last 5 years, Barnet issued one improvement notice for every 32 serious hazards they found. Compare that to Brent, who issued one for every 2 hazards.
Did you think that by complaining to the council you'd be protected?
Yeah, absolutely. We had an expectation that the council would be more interested in protecting the tenant than the landlord, because I think as a tenant you're always the more vulnerable person.
Councils say they are taking appropriate action, but they don't have the funds to enforce every case. Generation Rent, who are campaigning to end revenge evictions, say the system as it is isn't working.
Councils are under-resourced. Some councils do a great job, others not so much. Ultimately, the law needs to change. Section 21, which allows landlords to evict tenants without having to give a reason and allows them to kick tenants out just for complaining about the state of their property, that law needs to go.
It's essential to retain Section 21. It's what gives the landlords confidence that if they need to, they can get their property back. The real solution is more properties available in the private rented sector so people have a genuine choice.
It's just a very isolating experience, I think. It's quite scary and extremely stressful as well.
After their eviction, Alicia and Simon have now found a new flat. They say they're some of the lucky ones.
Look, you've been investigating this for a few months now. What can you tell us about the scale of this problem in terms of how bad it is for renters out there at the moment?
Well, Nina, I have spoken to so many people over the past few months of researching this, and I keep hearing this one thing over and over again, this feeling that the system is just too skewed in favour of landlords. There's such a competition for places in London and rents are so high that people often feel they've got no option than to rent a place in really quite poor condition. And then a lot of them are too scared to complain because of this fear of just being evicted. At the end of the day, good tenants just want decent housing for the amount they're paying here, and they don't feel like that should be too much to ask.
Katie, thank you. So why can't they get that? A man who may have some of the answers is the Deputy Mayor for Housing, James Murray. Why?
I wish I could answer the problem that Katie and others have experienced with some really rock-solid advice. But the truth is, the law is totally out of date when it comes to protecting renters. It needs to be radically overhauled to make sure that renters are properly protected, to make sure that we end Section 21, no-fault evictions, to make sure that tenants have the right to open-ended tenancies so they have some security. But the law needs to change, and the government has been behind the curve in terms of doing anything about it.
Point of view, what is the point of having City Hall and a mayor and a deputy mayor for housing if you guys can't fix some of these problems? The housing problem we know is incredibly complex. Surely this is an easier fix, especially when we're talking about councils' lack of continuity, different councils saying different things to tenants, and also the level of urgency that some councils will reply to tenants and some won't. Can't you have the power to at least address this while the government is sorting out the law?
Look, I wish we had the powers to sort out the situations that too many Londoners find themselves in. I wish that councils had the resources they need to properly take enforcement action against all the rogue landlords in their area. But the truth is that in City Hall we don't have statutory powers over the private rented sector. And the truth is,
what about over the
although
councils? Can't you make sure there is a consistent approach to when people complain about their rented housing?
So we're working with councils right across London. So if you look at the Rogue Landlord Checker, which is something the Mayor set up, it's a voluntary thing where councils can sign up to name and shame rogue landlords who they've prosecuted and so on. All the councils are signed up to that. So they are keen. It's still a bit of a postcode lottery, I'll admit, in terms of what service people get. But all councils are signed up to our Rogue Landlord Checker, and we've done that without any statutory powers and just voluntarily. But the truth is, and we can't get away from this issue, the law needs to change to make sure that renters have far more protection and to make sure that councils have the resources to enforce against those landlords who don't behave correctly.
OK, one of the things that the government is being urged to do, and it was urged to do yesterday, was get what's called an MOT for properties, so an annual inspection on properties to check that landlords are indeed making sure the properties that people are paying thousands of pounds for per month are safe, they are able to live in them. Why can't London lead the way and start that scheme now? Because in terms of bureaucracy for City Hall, that would be a great step forward, wouldn't it, to make sure people who are paying thousands are just getting what they need, a roof over their heads that's safe.
So, as I say, the basic problem is the law is not in place there to give councils and City Hall all the powers we need, and the resources are not there to do it comprehensively.
Is it? This is bringing in a check and inspection. Couldn't you do that? It seems like a simple, straightforward, really good solution to make sure properties are right for people.
So the idea of an MOT was floated in the last couple of days in a report that recently came out. What we would say is that the system at the moment, whereby councils can take a lead on licensing properties, is a good system that should be beefed up and should be properly resourced. If you have a rival system of MOTs, which are done potentially through the private sector, that could end up complicating matters. And as I know I keep coming back to this point, but it is really important that the law which governs the private rented sector is massively out of date.
OK, one final quick question. Are you putting enough government on the pressure on the government to change the laws then? Are you doing your bit for Londoners?
Absolutely. We wrote to the government just a couple of weeks ago saying the whole way that tenancies are done in London should be overhauled to make sure we have open-ended tenancies to renters, to make sure no fault eviction can't continue, and to make sure it's made fit for purpose in the 21st century.
All right, James Murray and Katie, thank you very much. Thank you.